trying to grapple with these issues. For the record, we must object, though, to the issuance of this new staff report and the further last-minute memorandum that was issued at today's meeting. This board has a special bylaw for school reorganizations, and that bylaw imposes a requirement beyond the Bagley-Keene Act concerning the public notice of agenda items. It requires that the staff report for a school reorganization public hearing must be issued at least 10 days prior to the public hearing, and you are conducting a public hearing, which is different from a regular activity on your agenda. Today's staff report may or may not enter into the record material or argument for which we were not permitted to prepare. This violates your own bylaw, and we are prejudiced by the failure to comply with the board's own special bylaw. With that preliminary matter, I'd like to begin with just running through the outline. We deal first with the context in which this issue arises, and that is that the Weisburn unification has a number of facts. One is that Weisburn indeed was created in 1892 when the area was ranch land and had the fortuitous event of the development of LAX, which resulted in the development of huge, very expensive commercial real estate directly south of the airport, aerospace industries and other commercial businesses. And out of the 4 Centinela feeder districts, Weisburn has nearly 50% of the assessed valuation of all of Centinela, even though it only has about a quarter of the territory. And you can see some pictures in the presentation of aerospace complexes, business campuses, high-end retail and entertainment complexes contained within the Weisburn area that are not found in the remainder of the Centinela district, which is what accounts for this huge disparity between population and territory and assessed valuation. Another fact that we all face here is that the Weisburn Elementary School District schools are rich as a result of this. For instance, Weisburn's Anza School is brand new, has a large multipurpose room and Wi-Fi internet access for its students. How many California school districts have Wi-Fi for their students? This is truly an extraordinary school district, as testified so eloquently by the students that you heard from here earlier. Another fact is, though, that Weisburn has fewer people and also fewer educational challenges. Unlike the Centinela feeder districts, Weisburn has fewer residents, fewer students, fewer residential taxpayers, and far more commercial taxpayers. They have far more white students, far more AP students, far more excelling inter-district transfer students that constitute 30% of their enrollment. Largely children of aerospace and other workers that work in the area, and far more middle-class residents. They have less English learners, less immigrant populations, and less economically distressed families. And all of this, we believe, is a sort of a quirky demographic which works to Weisburn's great benefit in being able to score very well on the API in comparison to our other feeder districts. But there's one fact in this reorganization that was within the control of the petitioners, and that was that they could have explored the formation of a charter high school that meets the same needs that they've articulated in their letters that you've received in your packets. They also could have proposed a unification and boundary change to give Centinela more of those commercial properties in order to appropriately reduce the negative impact. But instead, they chose to take all of the commercial valuable properties to enrich a few hundred children at the expense of thousands of Centinela students. These are some of the equities that you'll need to take into consideration as you, in the context of the legal issues I'm about to outline. We believe that the petition flunks 3 of the 9 conditions, and based upon these facts, that the secession is ill-conceived. It results in an inequitable distribution of property, and the county committee agrees. It inflicts unacceptable financial harm on Centinela, and the county committee agrees. And the proposal promotes racial discrimination and segregation. But the options, like a charter school, would remain even if the school board today denies this petition. Let's look at them a little bit more closely. Factor number 3, the secession results in inequitable distribution of property. The county staff analyzed the loss to Weisburn based upon the tax contribution that it was making to the $59 million of outstanding bonds. it would lead to a 200% increase in tax if the law operates as it's supposed to under reorganization to drop the liability from the territory transferred. The county committee voted that this condition was not met by the Weisburn proposal. Your staff has refused to analyze the 200% increase in taxes stemming from the loss under this factor, but without any explanation. They've said we'll talk about it in an election, but not under any of the other factors. If you look at your report, your staff has not analyzed this loss anywhere except under the election impact. And we think it's a significant factor that needs to be taken into consideration under whether or not the petition has merit to begin with. Factor 9, the secession will inflict negative impact. The county staff analyzed both the loss of the 40% evaluation and the loss of almost $1 million of ADA in the first year to Centinela. And the county committee, taking those two factors together, voted that the Weisburn proposal did not meet this condition. Your staff has, again, ignored the loss of the 40% assessed valuation in its reports and claims that this condition is substantially met, and we must respectfully disagree with that conclusion. Factor number 4, the secession shall not promote racial discrimination. Note that the statute here is different from all the other factors. It doesn't say shall not substantially. It says shall not promote racial discrimination, shall not promote segregation. Now, the county and your staff mechanically applied your state regulations, which essentially focuses upon segregation effects of reorganizations. In other words, what are the statistics among the various minority groups? But both staffs ignored the racial discrimination inherent in creating a super financially secure Weisburn with a post-unification bonding capacity of $118 million, and which also benefits a far greater percentage of white students compared to Centinela, and that this super financially secure district is at the expense of the almost 100%, like 96% minority majority district of Centinela. Also, the petition approval would promote racial discrimination. Weisburn is now and will increase the perception in this community, and perception is a factor in the law under racial discrimination, and the perception will be that it remains the whiter district, the wealthier district, the better district, and that Centinela will be perceived and further aggravate the perception that it is the minority district, the poor district, and the less desirable district. This creates essentially a separate but unequal status of two districts serving high school students in the same area. The secession also promotes segregation of white students. While county and your staff dutifully analyzed this macro percentage impacts of moving a mere 288 students out, of course the percentages are small, 288 students out of about 7,000. But a significant fact that is mentioned in the report but not taken into consideration in the final recommendation is the proposal removes 17% of all of Centinela's already meager white population. So the proposal will promote further segregation of the races, aggravating what is already a difficult situation. If any of these conditions, if you find or you believe that any of these conditions are not met, then the board must vote to deny the petition outright. The legislature entrusts you to closely scrutinize school reorganizations. And this duty includes the responsibility to not inflict on voters reorganization proposals that are bad for the districts that are affected and people impacted. The Weisburn proposal was inherently flawed from the get-go because the petitioners chose the most self-interested and the most Centinela punitive option available to them. Now we get to the question of determining, so that's the one issue, should the petition be approved? That's one of your issues. The next issue is, and completely separate from the petition, is what should be the area of the vote for the election. Often, all of the factors that you've heard about on the petition must come into your calculus in determining whether or not the voting area should be restricted to the area to be reorganized or expanded to the broader area because the broader area has significant interest in the election. Now, And while you enjoy wide discretion in determining the merits of a proposed reorganization, the voting area decision by you is subject to close judicial scrutiny. Taking away someone else's right to vote on a matter of significance to them would violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. And we cite to you the case of Fullerton Union High School District versus SB, the school board, State Board of Education. That case, if you saw it in your materials, is almost factually identical to this situation, where there was a proposal to create a unified Yorba Linda district out of the Fullerton Union High School District, and the State Board of Education voted to restrict the voting area to just Yorba Linda. The Supreme Court overturned your predecessor's decision and sent it back, saying that that was a violation of the constitutional rights of the persons in the greater Fullerton area, because they had a lot of concerns about the educational impacts upon their programs. It's not just about the money, which is what seems to have been the focus of a lot of efforts of your staff here, is to deal with the tax issue only. The Centinela interests that we've identified to your staff and that have been examined so far is the staff has examined two issues in your reports. One is this permanent shift of over 40% of assessed valuation, which would take Centinela's current bonding capacity to near zero or below zero, depending upon whose numbers you want to look at. We provide in your materials an updated chart based upon the LA County office, which shows that based upon the most recent assessed valuation figures, if you approve this unification, 47.6% of assessed valuation will be removed, not just 40, as was originally shown 2 years ago. In May of 2004, your staff found that both of these factors, the permanent shift and this 200% increase in tax, constituted under constitutional law a basis to order that the election, or to recommend that the election area should be all of Centinela. You don't have it in front of you, but your staff's report in May said, at the end of their analysis of the the shift, the removal of the bonding capacity, the 40% bonding capacity, they said, it is the opinion of CDE that under LAFCO, and that's a reference to the constitutional standard, this effect on Sentinel Valley constitutes a significant impact on the district. And then as to the 200% vote, they said, it is the opinion of CDE that under LAFCO, this constitutes a significant impact on residents in the remaining Sentinel Valley. We have to conclude from the parallel language that your staff concluded just a few months ago that these were independent reasons to expand the voting area to all of Centinela. And yet, the July report, after the a request for waiver by Weisburn, resulted in your staff reversing their position on both of these issues, even though the waiver only addresses the 200% increase in taxes. It does not address the permanent loss of bonding capacity. And that change by your staff remains in reports even today, even through today's last-minute memorandum. We don't understand. There is no explanation for the change of position on that. If it was good, if it was within constitutional rights of Centinela Valley to vote on this removal of bonding and this assessed valuation in May, why is it no longer? But there are, beyond these money things that you've heard most of the argument about so far, there are other significant factors that even though your staff did not analyze it for you in a report, you really have an obligation constitutionally to consider them. And those other significant factors include that the Centinela voters have a vital interest in the racial discrimination implications of creating the super secure Weisburn at the expense of the minority children of Centinela. That's a racial thing that the courts have recognized. Centinela voters have a vital interest in whether or not they support segregation of 17% of their remaining white enrollment. Centinela voters have a vital interest in whether or not they support the disproportionate removal of AP students and other, and leaving behind English learners. And AP students are really the foundation of our attempts to meet the mandates under No Child Left Behind. But your staff is really just focused on the effort to reallocate debt. And as is attached in our analysis, you will see that opinion of tax counsel that the district also retained shows that regardless of how you may, if you decide to adopt your staff's recommendation to do this reallocation of bonded indebtedness, which we argue is contrary to the law for numerous reasons, unfortunately, and for which we apologize, reviewed exhaustively in our materials for you, because we want to make sure that you have this in front of you. There's still a problem, and the problem is that under Civil Code 526A, a single taxpayer in the Wiseburn area does have the right and standing to go to court and say, I am helping to pay about $24 million of bonded indebtedness, and I received nothing because there was no school facilities transferred as part of this unification to me. And that constitutes a waste of taxpayer funds. We think the taxpayer would have a very strong argument because your staff's interpretation of the law is ignoring the code section where the legislature directs you to drop the liability if there are no facilities transferred. That's section 35575 of the code. Supreme Court law in California says you cannot interpret the statutory framework to completely read out or make or nullify a statute in the framework. You should read it all in harmony. We think your staff reading does the opposite. So for all of the reasons that we've outlined, there are reasonable options that you have available to you today. One of them is this idea of the charter school. It has been offered but denied so far by the administration of Wiseburn on the thought that they wanted to see how this petition turns out. We're all in this boat together. And so we need to pick up the oar and row together. And so one way you can do that is to authorize, deny this petition and allow us to explore a charter school which is less punitive. Thank you very much.
Hi, I know in the interest of time, we're going to speed it up for you.
Good morning. Members of the board, Superintendent O'Connell. I'm Don Carrington, Superintendent of Hawthorne School District, and I've been in the district 34 years, the last 8 as superintendent. I'm really not here as an advocate for either Wiseburn or Centinela. I'm superintendent of a district that is the primary feeder district to Centinela. We have 10,000 students. We graduate on average 1,200 students every June, the majority of whom attend Centinela Valley Union High School District. Our district, Hawthorne, with different individuals, we have looked at the issue of unification internally ourselves. When I sat down with staff from the LA County office, they indicated one of the primary prerequisites was going to be, if this petition moved forward, that would require a district-wide election. That's my concern, and that's why I'm here this morning with you. We teach children in geometry class that the whole is equal to the sum of its parts. With the exiting of Wiseburn, with this shifting of assessed valuation, whether or not financially Centinela is going to survive and what sort of dollars are going to be able to generate through future bonded indebtedness remains to be seen. It's a very open question. But I can tell you with all certainty that the parents in my district have the same expectations for a quality high school as the parents in Wiseburn. And I believe that the parents in my district, as well as the other feeder districts, should have the opportunity to be involved in this decision through the election process, and at the same time allow both, and I respect both agencies. I've known these folks and I respect their staffs. Their board members do an outstanding effort. But of an issue of this nature that has such far-reaching impact, I believe that the election should, and I believe the statute designates, should be area-wide and allow the various interests to express to the voters what the options are, what the impacts are going to be, and let the voters decide. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Maria Calix, Board President of Centinela Valley Union High School District. Good morning to all you. Now I'm on the other side, right? Usually I have to face all the concerns ourselves, and I'm glad to stand before you. And Superintendent O'Connell, nice seeing you again. You have heard so many concerns on both sides today, and we're all here to ensure that education is number one. In doing this, unfortunately, we have to deal with some other elements, and we certainly don't want to walk away or make a decision that will, in essence, give the wrong sign of buying somebody's vote. We certainly don't want to be the ones to do that. This is indeed a democratic process, and our Pledge of Allegiance says justice for all. As much as we want to be able to ascertain that certain individuals are indeed pleased or appeased, we must look at the whole pie. And there's no equality on this proposal, as you have heard. Small number versus a large number, rich versus poor. The quality of education is for all, not just a few. Therefore, I oppose to this proposal by the Wiseburn School District. And again, make sure that in your decision, you looked at the whole pie. Thank you very much.
My name is Darlene Love, and I'm the grandparent of a young man that is at Hawthorne High. He's going into the 11th grade. I've been going every day since he's been from 9th grade to the 11th grade. I take him to school and I pick him up. Never once has Stephen come home and we have encountered problems. Now, and believe me, I'm all over the city. There's only a few people that does not know Darlene. And that's from the Wiseburn area to Centinela Valley. And, you know, we have that sign saying the city of good neighbors. And when you get a city that we're not that large, that we are so division in our education and things like that, I think if we would pull ourselves together, rectify if there is some problems, put them together, and we can do this. You know, where there's unity, there is strength. But two houses divided against themselves will not stand. So somebody is going to lose in this battle. And I feel that Centinela Valley is a great school. We have some great people there. I am really pleased because from coming from the South, believe me, I have just about encountered everything. And you can make it if you try, but you cannot go with a negative attitude anywhere and think that you are going to make it. So what I am going to say that I hope you all will look at this issue really long, and any day you want to come to Hawthorne, you're welcome to come, and I'll ride you to school a couple of weeks. I have extra bedroom, and just let you see what it's like there, since I've heard so much like it's such tragic. Believe me, they do have protection on the campus, and I'm glad it's there. I'd hate to know what this world would be like if we didn't have people there. And even if they build this new school, they're going to have it there because kids are different all over. This world has become different because all over it has been unified. Television has exploited the whole world. So you're not talking about different kids. I went south and they're the same down there. So you're not going to pull a school and think that you're going to have just a perfect school. No. What you need to do is all of us get together, sit down, whatever our differences are, that we can resolve them and make this a beautiful school. And I still believe where there's unity, there is strength. Thank you.
My name is Bob Weiler. I'm the president of the Centinela Valley Secondary Teachers Association. I'm here not only representing the teachers of our district, but I'm also representing our students and our students' children and our students' grandchildren who are going to be affected by the decisions that you make today. Wiseburn was in our district apparently for over 100 years, and things were fine until the community as a whole started to make some changes. We have many more English learners now. If Wiseburn is able to leave our district, they will be taking with them, as they said, some of the white students, but some of the higher test scores. That's going to affect our test scores and the perception of our district. And we have recently, last year, or this summer I should say, we've got a new administration in place who is doing a fantastic job, that the teachers, which before we had some problems with the administration, now we're working hand in hand with the administration, and we're looking forward to a great future. And I think the Wiseburn students would benefit by coming to our schools, because our future is nothing but bright.
Good morning. My name is Frank Talivar. I'm president of CSEA Chapter 47, and I just wanted to express our concern about the impact of the unification proposal on the livelihood of our employees. Also, as a homeowner in the area, I feel that I need to have a voice and a vote on what's going to happen in the composure of the community. I think I'm afforded that. I appreciate the gesture of paying my part of the indebtedness, but I don't need anyone to pay that. I can do that. But I do require my vote, my voice, as what affects my community. So I'm asking you to give us an area-wide election. Thank you.
Good morning again. As I said earlier, I am the new superintendent of Centinela Valley High School District, and I will tell you, I have more than 30 years as an urban educator, and when I came to Centinela Valley 10 years ago, I was appalled. I thought, what in the world did I get myself into? I came from another urban school district, and I couldn't believe what went on in our schools, particularly one of our schools. It seemed very unsafe. However, we've met a whole lot of changes in the last 10 years. We have API scores that are low. We know that. However, they have improved. In 2003, Hawthorne High School's API scores went up 39 points, doubled the state target. Lawndale High Schools went up 59 points, more than doubled the state target. Lusinger High Schools went up 34 points, more than doubled the state target. This year, Lawndale High School's API scores went up 68 points. We have implemented comprehensive professional development. We have implemented instructional coaches that work with our teachers. We are really committed to ensure that students in the Centinela Valley get a quality education. We talk about advanced placement classes. One of the things that I know a small school cannot offer students is the number of advanced placement courses that we offer our students in Centinela Valley. Currently, we have 15 different advanced placement courses that we offer, and we have 67 sections of advanced placement classes that were taught last semester in the Centinela Valley. So we really are striving to provide quality educational programs for our students. I am committed. You've heard the teachers, you've heard the classified staff. We all are really trying to work together to ensure that students are able to succeed. We also have some real issues relative to what's happening with the unification. And one of the issues is the Wiseburn proposal will financially devastate Centinela Valley. Anytime a district loses 3.5% of its student population, but 47% of its assessed valuation, you have to know that's really going to affect us financially. Our schools are old, and I would invite you to look at our schools. They look better. Our schools were deplorable 10 years ago. They don't look that way now. They are better. We have used our bond money, but money only goes so far. Lusinger High School was built in 1930, and Lawndale High School and Hawthorne High School were both built in the 1950s. So our schools are old. We need to have future bonding capacity so that we can continue to maintain our schools, that we can refurbish our schools as needed. Like I said, 3.5% of our population and 47% of the assessed valuation is a real big hit. It's an unfair division of property. The Wiseburn district happens to be where all the corporations are, where all the large properties are, and that really is going to hurt us. The issue about socioeconomic and racial segregation in the Centinela Valley is a real concern of mine. In your report, I know you've received that only 17, Sentinel Valley will lose 17% of its white population. However, we have less than 5% population that is white currently. What does this mean for Wiseburn students? What it means for Wiseburn students is that instead of going to school in a school district where 5% of its population is white, it will go to school in its own district where almost 30% of its population is white. You can see why the perception in the Sentinel Valley is that this is racially motivated. The other issue is the permit situation. More than 30% of students in the Wiseburn district are on permits to Wiseburn. All school districts take permit students. And all of you know that who are you going to take in as a permit student? The students who are high achievers, students who are well-behaved, students who are aiming to go to college. Those are the people we take in Sentinel Valley. Who's Wiseburn going to let into their school if they're going to have 30% students on permits? Our concern is that they're going to be recruiting from other schools that feed into the Sentinel Valley, and they're going to be taking the top students from our district. What will this do? We will not only be devastated relative to the bonding capacity, but it's going to devastate our scores. It's going to devastate our student achievement. I'm a great proponent of Jeannie Oakes, who talks about heterogeneous grouping, and we need to ensure that we continue to have this in Sentinel Valley. You heard our teachers, you heard our classified staff. For the first time in Sentinel Valley, our Board of Education, our teachers, our administration, our classified staff, we really are working together for one reason: to promote student achievement, and we're really committed to ensure this is going to happen.
That's your time. It's 30 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, proponents rebuttal, and this will be 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tom Cox. I'm with the Wiseburn School District. Just very quickly, a couple items. One is assessed valuation does not affect the operating budget of a school district. So even with the reduced assessed valuation, Sentinel Valley will still have the same operating funds. It will not hurt them financially in that way. Both school districts are growing in ADA. If you look at the ADA growth for the last 5 years, each school district has continued to grow in ADA, and that is the case today. Second thing on assessed valuation, it is true there is a reduction in assessed valuation. Sentinel Valley produced some information that shows their assessed valuation will be, after unification, $66 million. That's greater than the outstanding bond that they have. That was based on last year's information. This year's information that was issued in July, their assessed valuation bonding capacity is now $71 million. That gives them several options. One, they could issue bonds for about $19 million if they have more work to do. Two, they could ask this board for a waiver if they chose to need more, feel they need more than $19 million. Or three, of course, there's a state hardship program, which districts in our area, such as Lennox, have applied to and actually built new schools because they'd used all their bonding capacity. I just point out staff report that on page 10 of 26 of your report, the racial makeup of both school districts will be the same. Wiseburn currently has 75% minority students. After unification, it'll be 75% minority students. Sentinel Valleys will remain the same also. So this is, as you heard from the parents earlier, this is not a wealth issue, it's not a race issue. This is parents concerned about their students' education, and that's what motivated this whole petition drive. I'd like to now turn it over to our Chief Counsel. He'll speak very briefly.
Good morning, John Hartenstein, and I'm a bond counsel. That's why I was asked to address these issues, and that's my area of expertise. But I will just try and quickly go over some of the points that have been raised and address them. You know, in general, we've made all of our presentation to staff and legal counsel, and we expect that your legal counsel is able to synthesize these things and decide what is most important for you to focus on, and so I don't really intend to get into all of that. want to point out that, yes, again, the staff believes all 9 criteria have been met. Bonding capacity, which is much is made of here today, bonding capacity is not one of the 9 criteria. It doesn't fit within those categories. It has its own separate statutory requirements that must be met. And indeed, if the Centinela Valley School District were left with insufficient bonding capacity according to the statute, that would be a complete bar to the reorganization. So they're not, they have met the statutory requirement based on the best information available, and I don't think they deny that. And once that's done, that's really all you're required to do under the law. You can look further at the various factors, but you are not required to consider bonding capacity expressly as if it were one of the economic factors affecting the district. And in that vein, Centinela Valley's future needs are clearly speculative. I mean, we don't know what their needs will be. We don't know if they will call for a bond election. We don't know if their voters would approve a bond election. We don't know if they need more bonding capacity right now. And I believe district staff, Wiseburn staff, has addressed how facility needs can be met by Centinela in any event. I want to point out, again, that in reorganization, as I've described to your legal counsel, in reorganization matters, the legislative power is plenary. So the legislature has the power to set up school districts as it wishes, to redraw boundaries, to reallocate taxes and debt, and so forth. And it has provided a scheme in the law which delegates this authority to the State Board of Ed to make your determinations as to what is right and proper and fair. And if you read the scheme of this law, it's very clear that it is not about strictly construing that one district that has no property shall take no debt with it or anything else. What it's about is fairness, and it's about getting the best scheme for all the districts involved. And that's why it's replete with opportunity for plans and recommendations, and for you to make changes to plans and recommendations, and to allocate things either by assessed valuation, if that's the default position, if that's the most fair, or if that's not the right outcome, then to make changes in the allocation. And that's all that I think is being asked by Wiseburn here today. The issue of voter approval, that there's a need for the Centinela Valley voters to speak on this, and that there's in fact substantial.
That's 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, rebuttal from the opponents, please.
Once again, thank you very much. I would like to respond. Mr. Cox was exactly right when he said that bonding capacity is, and you can't use bond money and assessed valuation is not the operating budget. However, when you have schools that are 50, 60, 70 years old and you don't have bond money and the pipes break, guess what? You're going to have to use general fund money to fix the facilities, fix the pipes. So directly, it doesn't affect the general fund budget, but indirectly it definitely does, because we still have to maintain our schools. I also would like to address the fact that the bonding capacity after unification for Centinela Valley would be $8,785 per student, and in Wiseburn it would be $52,692 per student. There doesn't seem to be a lot of equity there. I'm real concerned about 2 districts side by side, one much more affluent, having a lot more money, fewer minority students, Centinela Valley, larger district, 95% minority students, lower socioeconomic status. What are we having here? It really concerns me. What is the appearance going to be? Morally, how can we support something like this? I would also like to address the overcrowded issues. We have large schools, but they are not overcrowded. Lusinger High School and Hawthorne High School both have approximately 3,000 students. Lawndale High School has about 1,300, 1,400 students. So we have one school that is smaller. And our teacher-student ratio is 30 students to 1. Most high schools have larger class sizes than that. We are bound and determined to educate our students. Please, we urge you not to vote for this unification, but if you do, think about letting everybody vote. Everybody needs to have a vote. Everybody in the Centinela Valley counts, and everybody should have a vote. What I would like to recommend is that the Wiseburn School District start a charter school. We will work with them, we'll sponsor it, we'll support them, anything they need. I mean, I'm committed to do that. This will enable them to have a high school in their area, but they won't be taking away all of our property values. They won't be taking away our assessed valuation, and there still will be some equity. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. That now closes the public hearing, and we'll go on to board deliberation and action. And I'd just like to say I thank everyone for coming. I know there's passion on both sides, and we appreciate hearing from you all, and we're going to do our very best to come to an equitable solution. So I want to invite Ray Belisle, our Executive Director, to make a few comments to start us off.
And in keeping, I'm actually going to call on Karen Steentop to address some of the legal issues that were raised. I will tell you that your staff has had great pleasure in receiving tombs right before the Labor Day holiday from the Centinela District, which I spent some of my time reading. And just for purposes of the record, this is it, the latest one. And I don't agree with much of what's in it, and there are some that I could be very specific with, and I'll just look at page 5 because I have the most explanation marks on that page. And I wanted it on the record because I wouldn't want you to just assume that everything in a document like this is accurate. And when they talk about how the board deals with putting over agenda items, in reorganizations, the practice of this board, and in this case as well, has been to have approval of both sides before an item is put over. And that is the process that was followed, and I understand that Centinela has some confusion about that. But I can assure you, since I'm cited liberally in here, that that's exactly what I did, and every time it was put over, I had approval of both sides or it didn't go. But with having said that, I'd like to pass it over to Karen Steentop to address some of those legal issues.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to address the issue of notice. This matter was properly noticed. It was sent out 10 days prior with the rest of the agenda. The recommendation of the staff remains the same as it did when it was sent out originally. The only difference in the blue is the mechanism to accomplish the recommendation, the question of whether you needed a waiver or whether the reorganization law allowed for the transfer of the bonded indebtedness through the plan. And actually, Centinela received actual notice that that was our belief that that was doable 3 weeks prior to this meeting by a phone call by myself to their attorney. I called them again to see whether there were any issues that I had overlooked and wanted to make sure that this was a sound recommendation. And so they did know 3 weeks prior that this was going to be the staff recommendation, and that we were, so they did receive constructive and actual notice of this, so it was properly noticed. I also wanted to point out that while there are 9 criteria in the law of what the reorganization, that you need to look at for the reorganization, besides subsection B of section 35753, there's also a subsection, besides A, there's also a B. And what the B says that is if the board can't literally apply all of the criteria above, you still have the discretion to approve a reorganization if it is the best interest of the students. So it modifies the 9 criteria by saying that they don't necessarily have to be literally applied. But you also, your staff recommendation is that they are all met, but it was raised by Centinela's counsel, so I wanted to make that clear. Thirdly, one of the reasons that this issue has been postponed a couple of board meetings is because we wanted to thoroughly explore the issue of whether or not the transfer of the bonded indebtedness could be attacked in court, and whether or not it would be successful one way or the other. We've, as you've seen, yeah, I'm going to apply for workers' comp on my eye strain. Reading through all of the material, we was thoroughly briefed by both sides, I'd have to say. And the main argument that Centinela's been able to come up with is this idea of waste. The case they cite is primarily a case regarding standing, who can sue on the issue of waste, more than the merits of how waste is defined. But it also, the case that they cite, the taxpayer was alleging that the same thing could be accomplished for less cost, and that really isn't what the issue is here. So I'm not, don't really find it too analogous, and at this point feel confident that it probably will be tested in court, but that it looks as though the case law would support approval and the transfer of the bonded indebtedness.
Open it up for board discussion.
Could I get clarification on 2 things? If they have a problem being able to go out for a GO bond or get additional money, to qualify for bond indebtedness, isn't there a provision within the state allocation system for hardship?
Larry may want to come up, because some of these questions are going to be questions that he can better answer, but having worked in school facilities for a while, I can respond to that one.
While Larry's coming up, yes, there is a provision for hardship. There's hardship money in the Prop 55 that passed and 47 before that, and then there's also the authority to waive the bond and indebtedness. So if a district wishes to pursue in excess of their own bond and indebtedness, they have that right with the waiver authority.
Okay, one more quick question. When it comes to API scores, I realize it's different with AYP, but API, if there is a unification that substantially changed the student population, and while I personally believe that we need to have high standards for every student that's in a school, but can we not rebase an API? Or I know that when we change boundaries within local school districts, that we have the ability to get a new API based on the change in student population. We can rebase their API. Can we do that for unification?
It doesn't happen specifically around unification. It happens anytime there's a material change in the students. So for example, a school goes from magnet status to not magnet. That would be another example. And in that case, there's exactly what you said, which is it's when the base API comes out, it reflects. And sometimes you can have a 1-year gap in valid API because you don't know the base cycle. But there's a mechanism already built in for that. Don't know, the way it works is the superintendent asserts that, or the district asserts that the student population of a particular school changed materially, and then that triggers the mechanism. So it doesn't automatically happen with reunification, but it's a mechanism that they can use.
I have a couple of questions as well. I would like to know, historically, when you have a smaller section of a large school district wanting to make their own, an elementary school district wanting to make its own high school, unified school district, the situation about the voting, when it has to go back to the voters of the area, does the voting occur within the smaller area only generally, or does it go to the whole area? That's one of my questions, and the other one will have to do with charter schools. So I'd like that first one addressed if that's possible.
Larry, you want to go ahead and talk about the voting area?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Larry, the question is when there is a unification and it's a small area pulling away from a large area, and it does legally have to go back to the area for a vote to agree that this is going to happen, does it usually go back to a larger area, the whole area votes on it, or does just the area that's reorganizing and becoming a unified area vote?
Well, the way the code is written is that the default election area is just the area being reorganized. And what you need to do, if you feel that people who in the rest of the high school district in this case have a reason to be voting on it, then you can expand the area. Typically it's limited to the area being reorganized unless there is some reason to expand it, such as racial impacts on the remainder of the district, some significant financial impact on the remainder of the district. I'm not ready to answer that question. I have to look at the record.
Well, I can just tell you, since I've been here, I can't tell you the whole time the board's been doing this, but typically over the last 7 years that I've been here, they've generally gone with the smaller voting area. Do you know how many times on the voting issue? It's every single time.
We do an average of about 7 of these a year.
Yeah.
The last 10 years is about last 10-year average is about 7 either unifications or territory transfer appeals per year. All of them require an election. And just to follow up on what Ray said, one of the reasons that I don't have exact numbers, but I can say typically the unification or the election area is limited to the area being reorganized because some of the factors I just mentioned about financial impact or racial impact on the remaining district, they're taken care of in terms of when you look at the conditions. So we tend to recommend disapproval of the proposal under those conditions, and you don't establish an election area
if you disapprove the proposal.
Most of them were disapproved, I think, and we didn't allow 7 votes a year, in my opinion.
We've had, these are both reorganizations as well as territory transfers. And I think that we have had several, oftentimes per board meeting, sometimes we've had as many as 3 in one board meeting. So I would say that over a 10-year period, I'd agree with what Larry described.
Recently, in the last couple of years, we haven't, especially the last year and a half or so, we haven't brought as many because our staffing has been cut from three positions to 1 position, so we're not able to bring as many to you right now.
Remember we heard about the long delays where it's in their office for more than a year, and
right.
How was that issue?
And isn't it true, Ray, our policy trend, at least since I've been on the board, has been to not we generally tend to go with the opinion of local community boards, counties. We had several members of the board who are no longer with us, but we're adamant about, the closer the board is to the community, the wiser the decisions are going to be.
Generally, the board has been quite deferential to the county committee and the local governing bodies with respect to local matters, and so I'd agree with that statement.
If I may quickly, just for the audience, apologize for my prolonged absence. You've all traveled a long ways, and it's rude for me to have stepped out. My pesky day job gets in the way sometimes, so apologize for that.
I just had that one other question about the issue of the charter school. It was brought up by both sides. One side offering it, the Unified School District, and the other side said they had approached and tried had tried that approach of a charter school and had been kind of brushed off. And it's not clear to me what the situation really is.
And maybe Larry could address if you know the charter school issue, but one thing I would like to point out, just as you're deliberating and if you're thinking of the charter school issue, Centinela is one of your very first program improvement districts. That's a district-wide program improvement status. And in light of all the other discussions that you've had on charter school oversight, you might keep that in mind as you entertain whether or not you think that's a good idea. But certainly, there are options to form charter schools, even with a program improvement school district.
We didn't look at the charter school issue in our analysis. That wasn't part of anything we were examining. I would point out that there are a number of, within the high school district, there are a number of charter high schools that have been started by the other component elementary districts. I think there are 4 charter high schools right now within within Centinela Valley High School District, if I'm correct on that. 4. Right, I think there's 1 in Hawthorne, 1 in Lawndale Elementary, and 2 in Lennox.
Okay, Ricky.
What was their reason for not choosing a charter?
Again, we didn't look at the issue of charter schools.
Can I ask them the reason for, what are the barriers for not choosing a charter?
When we first thought about what we're going to do for our children, we looked at the charter school as a very easy way of maybe solving. But there were 2 things that really stood out in the community. One was we wanted a K through 12 articulation. We wanted to make sure that the education policies would be all the way down starting from kindergarten to the 12th grade that gets our children ready for the UC system. The second thing is that it was still going to be controlled by Centinela Valley as far as the number of students who can attend. And most of the parents do not like that because we want all our children to partake in a better education. The recent offer that they did just a few months ago to us was more or less a distractor for this meeting. They had no intent. We had an outgoing superintendent, Dr. Julian Lopez, and who had mentioned that, and they said they would build us a charter school. Well, one thing, what projects they have started, and by the way, we're not talking about classrooms, we're just talking about a performance theater and a cafeteria. They can't even finish those. So there was empty promises, and the community felt very strong in continuing this unification effort, and that was our discussion even way back in the year 2001. Does that answer your question, Don?
Not thoroughly. I still don't understand. I mean, you can manage your own school. It could very well have the same criteria that you're talking about as far as education is concerned to go into the university system, et cetera. I just don't fully understand what barrier that because you have the facility there that's vacant. And if you turned that into a charter, I don't know why you can't even have the same kids that you were talking about before in that charter school.
Just in your packet, I know I have personally sent a letter that just recently that the environmental high school charter school sued Centinela Valley for ADA and facility use, and of course Centinela Valley won. And that is a real position on charter school.
Yeah, but they've agreed to give you the ability to open a charter school in the facility. It would be my understanding to open a charter school in that facility.
Could
I
I-
don't believe it was sincere.
Suzanne?
But I mean, let me just jump in here quick. One of these are such difficult issues for us as a board to deal with because they impact huge issues in a local community. Fortunately, the law is very specific. We're in a procedural piece of a chain of issues, and the law is very specific about what we can and can't consider. It's not ours to consider that they should have done anything different. There's a step in the process, and we have these 9 guiding elements, and we have to find if those elements are met or not, and if they are, they can go to a vote, and our decision-making is very contained. So we don't have to wrestle with all the issues that were presented by both sides. We need to look at those elements and decide on those 9 elements.
Okay, Ricky?
I apologize for shifting focus here, but as I see a few of my constituents sitting out there in the audience, I have to ask a question, which is, I'm sensing a bit of a discrepancy when it comes to the student demographic. And given the fact that there have been multiple charges laid by both sides as to motivation for this unification proposal, I just am not seeing clarity there. So, sir, if you could give us some clarification on that.
When we look at the racial and ethnic makeup of a district, we simply look at minority versus majority students. And Centinela Valley is approximately 95% minority, and the Wiseburn district, I believe, is about 74% minority.
All right, thank you.
Reed?
There's always tough arguments involved in parents choosing new options and in creating new options. I'm interested in voting yes on this because I think it will create more total energy and more schools and more choices. But ultimately it comes down to the 9 criteria. And for myself, I'm satisfied that they're met. And I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation when the right time is.
Okay. Any more board comment on this? Ricky?
I think Karen mentioned earlier, do all 9 conditions have to be met? That was one of my questions. I think you mentioned it was subpoint B.
Right. Subpoint B allows that they don't have to be. The board may approve proposal of the reorganization if they determine it's not practical or possible to apply the criteria of the section literally, and that was the gentleman's earlier point that it had to on the minority racial issue.
Which is a little more subjective. There's no concrete number that states this would be racial segregation, this would be not. There's gray area there.
Right, and the staff has already recommended that criteria has been met. So you actually don't really need to go to B. I was mainly responding to his point.
Okay.
Okay, is there any further board comment? No, John?
Just a question of the again, Larry, if you could please, where the county commission and the county office of education differed in the resolution of those two. Just recap those briefly for me again.
Right, what the county office is recommending that all 9 conditions are met. You know, their concern with the equity of property issue was that there would be an increase in the tax rate of the remaining Centinela Valley property owners. So what they were recommending is that, what they were saying is that we find this condition met only if those people get an opportunity to vote on the issue that would raise their taxes.
And again, the group was the smaller district, the Wiseburn district.
Excuse me?
That would have for the vote.
No, they're recommending, both the county committee in terms of the election area, both the county committee and the county office of education were recommending an expanded election area. The county office is recommending that expanded election area because they believed that it was not fair to have the property taxes in for the remaining property owners in Centinela Valley High School District to go up significantly. And that was one of behind adding the provision to keep Weisburn's share of the bonded indebtedness within Weisburn. That would not allow the property taxes to go up within the remaining property owners.
I have a question also, because my only concern lies in people having the right to vote on things that impact them, and I'm curious as to the. It seems that you're saying that there will be that the property taxes will in fact go up if it's.
They would go up if the 40% of the assessed the 40% of the assessed valuation is going to be removed. Property taxes would go up if the property owners in that 40% of the assessed valuation didn't keep paying their share of the outstanding bonded indebtedness that they've been paying for a while.
Let's say it this way, under the motion that I made, they would not go up.
Right, because we're adding a provision.
They're still paying.
If I might.
And,
oh, I'm sorry.
And just a follow-up question, and under the motion Reed made, a legal opinion on the substantive ability for a legal challenge to be made from anyone not being able to vote? I mean, not them having standard, their likelihood of succeeding on the merits and something like that.
That was thoroughly briefed by both sides, and we're not convinced that they would be successful, or pretty sure there will be a challenge, but the case that they're relying on, their last set of papers were a case that regarded taxpayer challenge, that there was waste in government spending, and the situation in that case had to do with there were arguably cheaper ways of accomplishing the same thing. It was a whole different factual situation, and basically the case centered around standing about who could sue more than the facts of what defined waste. But
just for information on the record here, if you are going to have bonded indebtedness transfer without property, then you are determining the election area as the small area. If you allow a large area to vote on transferring debt without property, then I can tell you that you're in serious trouble, okay? So the question is, are you allowing the debt to transfer to Weisburn with no property, which is what you're being asked to do, and that's what's in the motion. And if that's what you want to do, then my legal opinion, I'm confident the other lawyers would say, it's the small election of Weisburn. If you're going to say, no, we're not going to transfer the debt, and we're going to leave it all the way it had been at the county committee, then you can go with the larger area.
So the motion is to do the waiver, which transfers the debt, and the transfer to the debt and the small election area.
Right. That's the motion on the floor. Any further board comment? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? The motion passes unanimous. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. Abstention by Joe Nunez. Motion carries. I'd like to take a 10-minute break, please. Thank you.
What about lunch?
No? Flores. Thank you, Gino. This is a regular item 17 that was moved.
Happy Thursday, Board. Service providers as referenced in the Title I legislation. A bit of background, we started to discuss this yesterday, so I won't go into real detail about the background. As you know, we've had a process in place for the last 2 cycles of approving providers on kind of as the applications come forward, they get reviewed by the department, they come to you for recommendations, and when the board approves them, they get added to the list. You may be aware that some of the school districts have difficulties with the continual addition because they like to present all the information at one time at the beginning of the fiscal year or calendar year for their schools to provide this information to parents. And when the additional ones come, they are required to notify parents, but they may have already produced pamphlets or documents already about all the providers. But they are still, it's still their responsibility to advise parents that the board has approved another one or sets or whatnot. We have been approving them, the board has been approving them for 1 year at a time, or 1 fiscal year, while we work to get regulations in place. And what we bring to you are some regulations that would create a process where the providers would be, if you approve these and they make it through the Office of Administrative Law and become law, public comments and all, we would create a system where the providers would be approved for a 2-year cycle. And in that 2-year cycle, they are required by Title I